Captain Hyun looked out the window of his ship as it moved toward the space station. The stars looked normal from here, but he knew better. Half the galaxy was burning in a war that had lasted 3,000 years. His job was to try and stop it, but 15 times before humans had failed to make peace. The space station called Haven's Rest floated in neutral space. It was the only place where the two enemy sides would meet. The Vorthan Empire and the Nexari Coalition had been fighting so long that no one remembered why the war started. They only knew how to keep fighting. Hyun's ship, the New Soul, docked at the station. He carried a briefcase with the latest peace plan from Earth. The human government had spent months writing it. They offered trade deals, shared technology, and new planets for both sides. Hyun knew it would not work, but he had to try. The station's meeting room was huge and cold. Two groups sat on opposite sides of a long table. The Vorthan looked like giant humans, but stronger and faster. Their bodies had been changed by science over many generations. They were built for war. Their leader, War Prince Kethmore, had scars across his face and arms that showed metal under his skin. The Nexari were different. They looked like tall, thin humans with pale blue skin, but they were not really individuals. They shared one mind across their entire species. Their speaker, Veltheta, had empty white eyes that seemed to look through everything. Hyun sat at the head of the table and opened his briefcase. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Earth offers a new path to peace," Kethmore laughed. The sound was deep and harsh. "Human, your species has been in space for only 300 years. This war is older than your entire civilization. What could you possibly understand?" Veltheta spoke with a voice that sounded like many people talking at once. "The human mind is simple and alone. It cannot grasp the complexity of our conflict. This war serves purposes beyond your comprehension." Hyun had heard this before. Every time humans tried to help, both sides treated them like children. "We understand more than you think," he said. "We've studied your war for 2 centuries. We see patterns you might miss." "Patterns?" Kethmore stood up. His huge frame cast a shadow over the table. "We fight because we are strong. The Nexari fight because they are many. There is no pattern except victory and defeat. The collective has calculated all possibilities," Veltheta said. "Peace is not mathematically viable while the Vorthan exist. They must be eliminated or absorbed." "We will never surrender to your hive mind," Kethmore growled. "Each Vorthan warrior is worth 1,000 of your drones." The argument started again. Hyun had seen it 15 times. The Vorthan believed strength was everything. The Nexari believed their shared mind made them perfect. Neither could imagine being wrong. While the aliens argued, Hyun looked at his tablet. His communications officer, Yoon, was sending him reports from across the galaxy. The news was bad. Both sides were building new weapons. The Vorthan had something called a stellar incinerator. The Nexari were working on a quantum plague. These weapons could destroy entire star systems. Hyun tried to get their attention. "Please listen. We have reports that both your peoples are developing superweapons. If you use them, our weapons are none of your concern," Kethmore interrupted. "The Vorthan Empire will do whatever is necessary to win. The collective's defensive measures are not subject to human approval," Veltheta added. The meeting continued for 6 hours. Hyun offered every compromise he could think of. The Vorthan wanted total victory. The Nexari wanted perfect unity. Neither would accept anything less. Finally, both alien delegations left. Hyun sat alone in the empty room, looking at his failed peace plan. Outside the window he could see warships from both sides. They stayed on opposite sides of the station, weapons ready, waiting. Yoon found him there an hour later. "Sir, we should go. The Vorthan and Nexari fleets are getting restless." Hyun nodded and followed her back to their ship. As they walked through the station corridors, he thought about what he had seen. The Vorthan and Nexari had been fighting for 3,000 years. In all that time, neither side had really changed their tactics. They fought the same way their ancestors had fought. The Vorthan always attacked with brute force. Their enhanced bodies and advanced weapons hit hard and fast. The Nexari always responded with perfect coordination. Their shared mind let them work together without mistakes. It was like watching the same battle over and over again. Back on his ship, Hyun called a meeting with his senior officers. They sat around a small table in the conference room. Besides Yoon, there was Navigator Day, Science Officer Min, and Security Chief Ko. "The peace talks failed," Hyun said. "Both sides are preparing superweapons. The war is about to get much worse. What can we do? Dee asked. Earth's fleet is tiny compared to theirs. Maybe we're thinking about this wrong, Min said. We keep trying to make peace between them. But what if the problem isn't that they won't make peace? What if the problem is that they can't? Hyun looked at her. What do you mean? The Vorthan have enhanced themselves for war for so long, they've forgotten how to think about anything else. The Nexari have shared one mind for so long, they can't imagine individual solutions. They're both trapped by what they've become. Yoon was reading reports on her tablet. Sir, I've been studying their battle records. Min is right. They use the same tactics over and over. The Vorthan hit hard, the Nexari coordinate perfectly, and nothing ever changes. Ko leaned forward. So what's the answer? Yun stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 2 alien civilizations were about to unleash weapons that could kill entire solar systems. Earth's tiny fleet could not stop them with force. Diplomacy had failed 15 times, but maybe there was another way. Maybe the answer wasn't to make peace between them. Maybe the answer was to change the rules of their war entirely. I need to talk to Admiral Wu, Hyun said. It's time to try something different. The galaxy had been burning for 3,000 years, but humans had only been in space for 300. They were new to this war, and maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Someone who didn't know that some problems were impossible to solve. Outside the ship, both alien fleets began to move away from the station, returning to their endless war. But this time something would be different. This time humanity would not just watch from the sidelines. 6 months had passed since the failed peace talks. The war between the Vorthan Empire and Nexari coalition had grown worse than anyone imagined possible. Admiral Wu stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Busan Prime, watching reports come in from across the galaxy. The Vorthan had used their new superweapon 3 days ago. The stellar incinerator had turned the Nexari colony world of Primdar into a ball of fire. 3 billion Nexari had died in seconds. The planet was now a dead rock floating in space. The Nexari response had been swift and terrible. Their quantum plague had been released in the Kelos system. Vorthan soldiers across 3 different worlds simply disappeared. They didn't die. They just stopped existing as if they had never been born at all. Sir, Communications Officer Gina called out. We're getting distress calls from the Korath system. Both fleets are heading there. Wu looked at the star map. Korath was a neutral system with mining colonies from several different species. Neither the Vorthan nor Nexari claimed it, but that wouldn't matter now. They were going to fight there and millions of innocent people would die. How long until they arrive? Wu asked. The Vorthan battle group will reach Korath in 18 hours. The Nexari swarm fleet will arrive 6 hours later. Wu nodded. The human fleet was small compared to the alien forces. Earth had only been in space for 3 centuries. Their ships were different from what other species built. Instead of focusing on one type of vessel, humans built everything. Fast attack ships, heavy carriers, stealth scouts, and support vessels that could change, their role depending on what was needed. The aliens called human ship design chaotic and unfocused. They didn't understand why humans would want so many different types of ships. The Vorthan built massive battleships designed to punch through enemy lines. The Nexari built swarms of identical vessels that moved as one mind. Dr. Yuna entered the bridge carrying a datapad. She had been studying both alien species for 20 years. Admiral, I have the analysis you requested. What did you find? Both species have stopped evolving. The Vorthan enhanced their bodies for war 1,000 years ago and decided they were perfect. The Nexari joined their minds together 2,000 years ago and stopped growing as individuals. They can't adapt to new situations because they've forgotten how to change. Lieutenant Commander Tay stepped forward. Sir, request permission to take Task Force 7 to Korath. We can evacuate the civilians before the fleets arrive. Wu shook his head. Tay, you have 12 ships. The Vorthan are sending 30 battleships. The Nexari have over 200 vessels. You'll be destroyed. Maybe not, Tay said. Dr. Yuna is right. They can't adapt. They always do the same things. What if we don't fight them the way they expect? Yuna looked up from her datapad. What are you thinking? The Vorthan expect direct confrontation. They want to prove they're stronger. The Nexari expect coordinated resistance. They want to outthink their enemies. What if we don't give either of them what they expect? Wu considered this. The human fleet couldn't win a direct battle against either alien force. But maybe they didn't need to win. Maybe they just needed to change the rules. Explain your plan. Tay moved to the star map. We split Task Force 7 into 3 groups. Group Alpha creates a distraction for the Vorthan fleet here, drawing them away from the colonies. Group Beta uses electronic warfare to confuse the Nixari sensors when they arrive. Group Gamma coordinates with the automated defense systems to make the Nixari think the stations are fighting back on their own. That's insane, Chief Engineer Bum said. You'll be outnumbered 10-1 in each engagement. Exactly. They won't expect us to divide our forces when we're already outnumbered. The Vorthan will think we're too weak to matter. The Nixari will calculate that we pose no threat. Dr. Yuna was running numbers on her pad. It could work. Both species have become predictable. They follow the same patterns they've used for centuries. Wu made his decision. Do it. Take Task Force 7 to Korath. Save as many civilians as you can. 8 hours later, Tay's ships arrived at the Korath system. The mining stations were in chaos. Ships from a dozen different species were trying to evacuate, but there wasn't enough time. The Vorthan battle group would arrive in 10 hours. Tay's communications officer, Ensign Ray, opened channels to all the civilian ships. This is Task Force 7 of the Terran Federation. We're here to help with the evacuation. The responses were not encouraging. Most species didn't trust humans. They saw Earth's fleet as too small and too new to make a difference. But some ships agreed to coordinate with the human evacuation plan. When the Vorthan fleet arrived, they found something they didn't expect. 4 human ships were broadcasting surrender signals while moving toward the main Vorthan battleship, but these ships were also launching thousands of small drones. War Prince Kethamor, commanding the Vorthan force, was confused. What are the humans doing? Are they surrendering or attacking? His tactical officer studied the scans. The drones are not weapons, sir. They appear to be rescue pods and communication relays. Rescue pods? In the middle of a battle zone? The human ships weren't trying to fight. They were using the confusion to evacuate civilians from the mining stations. While the Vorthan tried to understand what was happening, thousands of people were being moved to safety. When the Nexari swarm arrived 6 hours later, they found an even stranger situation. The Vorthan fleet was spread out across the system, trying to track human rescue operations. The mining stations were broadcasting on hundreds of different frequencies, creating electronic noise that confused Nexari sensors. Speaker Veltheta tried to coordinate the Nexari response, but the situation didn't match any of their battle calculations. The humans weren't fighting either fleet. They were just helping people escape. The human tactical pattern is illogical, Veltheta announced to the swarm. They divide their forces when outnumbered. They broadcast their positions openly. They ignore strategic targets to focus on non-combatants. For the first time in 3,000 years, both alien fleets withdrew from a battle without fighting each other. The Vorthan couldn't find an enemy to crush. The Nexari couldn't calculate a threat to eliminate. The humans had made the battle unnecessary. Tay's task force had saved over 2 million civilians. They had lost only one ship, and that was to an asteroid collision, not enemy fire. Back on the Buzan Prime, Admiral Wu read Tay's mission report with amazement. They just left? Both fleets withdrew to regroup, Tay confirmed. They didn't know how to respond to tactics they'd never seen before. Dr. Yuna was excited. This proves my theory. They can't adapt to new situations. Their evolution has stopped, but ours hasn't. Wu looked at the star map. The galaxy was full of similar systems where civilians were caught between the warring fleets. Tay, how many task forces can we organize? With our current resources? Maybe 20 small groups like the one we used at Korath. Do it. I want human ships in every contested system. Not to fight, but to change the rules. Communications Officer Gina looked up from her station. Sir, we're getting reports from across the galaxy. Other neutral species saw what happened at Korath. They're asking if humanity will help protect their colonies too. Wu smiled. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had watched the Vorthan and Nexari destroy each other. Now for the first time, someone was offering a different option. Send a message to Earth Command, Wu ordered. Tell them we need more ships. Not to win the war, but to change it. The Great Galactic War had found its first variable in 3 millennia. Humanity's refusal to accept that things had to stay the same. And across the galaxy, both the Vorthan Empire and Nexari Coalition were discovering that their perfect tactics might not be so perfect after all. President An stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Sanctuary. Representatives from 47 species filled the Great Hall, but all eyes were on the human leader. News of what happened at Korath had spread across the galaxy in just 2 weeks. For 3,000 years, this galaxy has burned. On began. Every species has tried the same solution: help one side win or stay out of the way. Both approaches have failed. Today, humanity offers a third option. The Althari ambassador, a tall being with 4 arms, spoke first. What can your young species offer that we have not tried? We have mediated, negotiated, and isolated these warring empires. Nothing works. That's exactly the point, On replied. You've all tried to end the war. We're going to make it impossible to continue. Murmurs filled the hall. The Zenthi delegate, whose species had lost 12 colonies to the conflict, leaned forward. Explain this human doctrine. President On activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red zones marked Vorthon space, blue zones showed Nexari territory, and the contested areas flickered between colors. The war continues because both sides know exactly what to expect from each other. The Vorthon attack with overwhelming force. The Nexari respond with perfect coordination. They've been playing the same game for millennia. So, the Corvan ambassador asked, so we changed the game. 3 days later, General Q briefed the human fleet commanders via quantum communication. Officers on ships across the galaxy listened as he outlined the new strategy. Effective immediately, all human forces will begin active intervention in the war, Q announced. But we are not picking a side. We are not trying to defeat either enemy. Our mission is to make their war unwinnable for both. Commander Hana raised her hand. She led the Disruption Corps, human special forces trained specifically for this conflict. Sir, what are our rules of engagement? There are only 3 rules, Q replied. First, never do what they expect. Second, always help civilians regardless of their species. Third, make every battle different from the last one. Admiral Wu, listening from the Busan Prime, had a question. General, the Vorthon have superior technology and enhanced bodies. The Nexari have quantum computers and perfect coordination. How do we compete with that? Q smiled. We don't compete. We've captured Vorthon biotechnology and we're using it in ways they never imagined. We've hacked Nexari quantum systems, and we're using their own computers to break their predictions. Both sides built their advantages to fight each other. They never planned for someone to steal their tools and use them differently. The new strategy began that same day. Human ships appeared at battlefields across the galaxy, but not as anyone expected. At the Battle of Nexus Prime, a Vorthon assault fleet found human ships already waiting in the system, but instead of defending the Nexari positions, the humans were evacuating both Nexari and Vorthon civilians from the planet's surface. When the Vorthon war commander ordered the attack, he discovered that destroying the human rescue ships would also kill thousands of his own people. The battle was postponed for the first time in Vorthon military history. At Kepler Station, a Nexari swarm surrounded the Vorthon supply depot, but human ships began broadcasting on the same frequencies the Nexari used for coordination. The quantum computers that linked the Nexari minds suddenly started receiving random data that made no sense. The perfect coordination collapsed into confusion. The Nexari withdrew to recalibrate their systems. Commander Hana's Disruption Corps struck supply convoys from both sides, but they didn't destroy the supplies. Instead, they redistributed them to refugee camps and neutral colonies. Medical supplies meant for Vorthon soldiers ended up healing Nexari civilians. Nexari food shipments were delivered to Vorthon prison camps. It's psychological warfare, Dr. Yuna explained to Admiral Wu. We're forcing both sides to see their enemies as people, not monsters. The effects were immediate and disturbing for both empires. War Prince Kethmore found his enhanced warriors questioning orders for the first time in generations. When Vorthon soldiers saw human medics treating their wounded enemies with the same care they showed Vorthon casualties, they began to wonder why they were fighting. Speaker Vel Theta discovered that individual Nexari were starting to think independently. The humans had introduced chaos into the hive mind, and some Nexari drones were making decisions without consulting the collective. This had never happened before. Captain Bach commanded the stealth ship Incheon Ghost. His mission was intelligence gathering, but what he found horrified him. Deep in both Vorthon and Nexari space, he discovered weapons research facilities working on planet killers. Admiral, we have a problem, Bach reported from his hidden position near a Vorthon research station. They're not just building weapons to win the war. They're building weapons to destroy the galaxy. The report Bach sent back showed the true scope of the threat. The Vorthan Stellar Incinerator was just the beginning. They were working on something called a reality bomb that could unravel the fabric of space itself. The Nexari quantum plague was being upgraded to affect not just living beings, but the basic laws of physics in entire star systems. Both sides have gone insane, Dr. Yuna said after reviewing the intelligence. 3,000 years of war have made them willing to destroy everything, rather than admit defeat. Admiral Wu called an emergency meeting of all human fleet commanders. The holographic images of 50 captains filled the conference room aboard the Busan Prime. The situation has changed, Wu announced. Both sides are developing weapons that could destroy all life in the galaxy. We're no longer just trying to end a war. We're trying to prevent the extinction of every species that exists. Captain Lee of the diplomatic vessel Jeju Dawn raised her hand. Sir, I've been monitoring communications from both sides. Something interesting is happening. For the first time in 3,000 years, Vorthan and Nexari commanders are talking to each other. What are they saying? They're demanding to know why we're forcing evolution on their species. They're starting to realize that their soldiers are changing, thinking differently. They're scared. Commander Hana leaned forward. Scared enemies make dangerous decisions. If they think we're changing their people, they might decide to eliminate us first. Let them try, General Q said through the communication link. We've studied their tactics for 2 centuries. They know how to fight each other, but they don't know how to fight us. Dr. Yuna had been working on her datapad throughout the meeting. I think I understand what's happening. We're not forcing evolution on them. We're just showing them that evolution is still possible. The Vorthan enhanced their bodies and stopped growing. The Nexari joined their minds and stopped changing. But evolution never really stops. It just gets redirected. What do you mean? I mean that every time we force them to experience something new, we're awakening parts of their minds that have been sleeping for centuries. Vorthan warriors are learning to work as a team. Nexari drones are learning to think as individuals. They're becoming more than what they were. Admiral Wu looked at the star map showing human operations across the galaxy. In just 3 months, they had changed the nature of every major battle. Neither side could predict what would happen when human forces arrived. Continue current operations, Wu ordered. But be ready for anything. If both sides decide we're the real threat, we'll be facing the combined might of 2 galactic empires. Sir, Captain Lee interrupted. I'm receiving a transmission. It's from Vorthan and Nexari High Command. They want to meet with us. Together? Yes, sir. For the first time in 3,000 years, they want to have a 3-way negotiation. Wu smiled. Set it up. It's time to see if they're ready to learn something new. The galaxy held its breath as 3 species prepared to meet. The eternal war was about to face its greatest challenge, the possibility of change. Engineer Sue worked in the darkness of space, her team floating between 2 massive structures. On one side was a Nexari hive node, a giant crystalline ship that connected thousands of Nexari minds. On the other side was a Vorthan command fortress, a mobile battle station where their greatest warriors planned their attacks. Are you sure this will work? Asked Technician Rock through the comm system. Sue checked her equipment one more time. The theory is sound. We hacked their systems separately before. This time we're connecting them to each other. It was the most dangerous mission humans had ever attempted. If they were caught, both alien empires would unite to destroy Earth. But Dr. Yuna's research showed it was the only way to break the cycle of war. Beginning infiltration, Sue whispered. Her team split into 2 groups. Half went to the Nexari ship, half to the Vorthan fortress. They had studied both technologies for months. Nexari systems were based on quantum entanglement, millions of minds linked together. Vorthan systems used biotechnology. Living computers grown from enhanced brain, tissue. The humans were going to force these 2 completely different systems to talk to each other. Susu group reached the Nexari hive node first. The ship was beautiful and terrible, made of living crystal that pulsed with blue light. Inside, they could hear the whispers of 1,000 Nexari minds thinking as one. Neural interface established, reported Specialist Moon from the Vorthan fortress. Their biocomputers are responding to our connection. Quantum link is stable, Sue confirmed. Beginning cross-connection in 3, 2, 1. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality changed. On the Nexari ship, Speaker Veltheta suddenly felt something impossible, individual thought. For the first time in her life, she was alone in her own mind. She could still hear the collective, but it was distant, muted. Her own thoughts were clear and separate. What is happening to me? She whispered. On the Vorthon fortress, War Prince Kethmor experienced something equally shocking. His enhanced mind, trained for individual combat, suddenly filled with the thoughts and feelings of every warrior under his command. He could feel their fears, their doubts, their hopes. The perfect isolation of the enhanced Vorthon mind was broken. I can hear them, he said in wonder. I can hear them all. The effect spread like wildfire. Nexari drones across the hive node began thinking for themselves, making personal decisions. Vorthon warriors in the fortress found themselves naturally coordinating without orders, moving as one unit. But the real shock came when both sides realized they could sense each other's minds. Nexari technician named Fen suddenly understood the loneliness of the Vorthon soldier, whose thoughts she could feel. The Vorthon warrior, Garth, experienced the comfort of belonging to something larger than himself. For the first time in 3,000 years, enemies saw each other as people. Commander Jin, watching from the human observation ship, witnessed something that had never happened in galactic history. A Vorthon strike team and a Nexari swarm, engaged in battle near a mining colony, suddenly stopped fighting. Sir, reported his sensor operator, both groups are laying down their weapons. Jin stared at the display. Confirm that report. Confirmed. The Vorthon soldiers and Nexari drones are surrendering to each other. They're requesting medical assistance and talking to each other. It was impossible, but it was happening. The psychological barriers that had maintained the war for millennia were crumbling. When Vorthon warriors experienced the collective unity of the Nexari mind, they realized they had been fighting alone for too long. When Nexari drones felt individual consciousness, they discovered that being separate didn't mean being enemies. Admiral Wu received the reports from across the galaxy within hours. The effect was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Vorthon soldiers were questioning orders, requesting transfers, and in some cases simply refusing to fight. Nexari drones were making independent decisions, creating art, and expressing individual opinions for the first time in their species' history. It's working too well, Dr. Yuna warned during an emergency meeting. We wanted to show them alternatives to war. We didn't expect to cause a complete psychological revolution in both species. Is that a problem? Asked General Q. It could be. Change this sudden can cause panic. Some members of both species might see this evolution as an attack on their identity. She was right. Within days, reports came in of Vorthon commanders trying to cure their evolved soldiers with combat drugs and mind-wiping techniques. Nexari hive masters attempted to force independent drones back into collective consciousness, using painful neural reconstruction. But the changes were irreversible. Once a Vorthon warrior experienced collective thinking, he could never return to complete isolation. Once a Nexari drone felt individual consciousness, she could never fully merge back into the hive mind. Captain Lee of the diplomatic vessel Jeju Dawn received the most important message in galactic history. It came on a secure channel, transmitted simultaneously from Vorthon High Command and the Central Nexari Collective. This is War Prince Kethmor of the Vorthon Empire, the message began. This is primary speaker, Veltheta of the Nexari Coalition. Came the second voice Lee realized she was hearing. The first joint communication between the enemy leaders in 3,000 years. We demand an immediate meeting. With human leadership, both voices said together. Explain what you have done to our people. Lee forwarded the message to Admiral Wu, who called President on Earth. Within hours, preparations began for the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history. The location was Haven's Rest, the same neutral station where Captain Hyun had failed to make peace just 1 year earlier. But this time everything was different. War Prince Kethmor arrived first. He was no longer alone. He brought with him a group of evolved Vorthon warriors who could think as both individuals and as a collective. They moved with a coordination that was beautiful to watch, each warrior perfectly in sync with the others while maintaining his own personality. Primary speaker Veltheta came with a delegation of awakened Nexari. They were still connected to the collective, but each one was clearly an individual. They spoke with one voice when they chose to, but could express personal opinions when they wished. What have you done to us? Kethmor demanded when the meeting began. President An, who had flown from Earth specifically for this meeting, looked at both alien leaders calmly. We showed you that you could become more than what you were. You have violated the genetic integrity of the Vorthon people, Kethmore accused. You have disrupted the collective consciousness of the Nexari species. Veltheta added. No, An replied. We've given your people choices they never had before. Your evolved warriors can still fight as individuals when they need to. Your awakened drones can still join the collective when they choose to. We haven't taken anything away. We've given you more options. Dr. Yuna, who was part of the human delegation, presented her research. Both your species stopped evolving centuries ago. You decided you were perfect and stopped growing. But evolution never stops. It just waits for the right conditions to continue. Kethmore struggled with concepts his enhanced mind had never considered. But if we change, are we still Vorthon? Veltheta faced the same question. If we think as individuals, are we still Nexari? You're more than you were before, An answered. And that's what evolution really means. Becoming more than what you started as. The meeting continued for 3 days. For the first time in galactic history, Vorthon and Nexari delegates worked together to understand what was happening to their people. They discovered that their evolved soldiers and awakened drones were not becoming enemies of their own species. They were becoming the next step in their development. On the final day, something unprecedented happened. Kethmore and Veltheta shook hands, a human gesture neither species had ever used before. But it felt natural to both of them. The war cannot continue as it has, Kethmore admitted. The collective calculates new possibilities, Veltheta agreed. President An smiled. Then let's build something new together. The 3,000-year war was ending not with conquest or surrender, but with growth. And across the galaxy, evolved Vorthon and awakened Nexari were discovering that the universe was full of possibilities they had never imagined. 2 years after the Great Meeting at Haven's Rest, the galaxy looked completely different. Counselor Park walked through New Harmony, the first integrated colony where humans, evolved Vorthon, and awakened Nexari lived together. The city was unlike anything that had ever been built before. The buildings combined all 3 architectural styles. Vorthon structures were strong and practical, built to last forever. Nexari buildings flowed like water, designed for perfect harmony. Human architecture adapted to both, creating spaces where all 3 species could live comfortably. Park stopped at the central plaza where children of all 3 species played together. Young Vorthon, their enhanced abilities focused on games instead of war, lifted Nexari children who giggled with individual delight. Human children taught both groups Earth games that required cooperation instead of conflict. It's working better than we hoped, said researcher Mina, joining Park at the plaza's edge. She had been documenting the changes in both alien species since the integration began. What have you learned? Park asked. The evolution is accelerating. Vorthon who learned collective thinking are becoming incredible coordinators and city planners. Their enhanced bodies combined with shared consciousness make them perfect for construction and engineering projects. Mina pointed to a group of Vorthon workers building a new residential complex. They moved together like dancers, each one knowing exactly where the others would be. But unlike the old Nexari collective, each Vorthon maintained his individual personality and could make independent decisions. What about the Nexari? Even more interesting. The awakened Nexari who gained individual consciousness are becoming artists, inventors, and explorers. They can still access the collective knowledge when they need to, but they're using it to create things that are completely new. In the distance, they could see a group of Nexari working on a sculpture that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Each Nexari artist was expressing her own vision, while contributing to a greater whole that none of them could have imagined alone. The real success story was in orbit above the planet. The Tri-Species Council met in a space station that had been jointly designed and built by all 3 civilizations. Former War Prince Kethmore, who now went simply by Keth, worked alongside former primary speaker Veltheta, who had chosen the individual name Vel. The integration of Colony 7 is complete, Keth reported to the Council. The Vorthon construction. Teams worked with Nexari planners and human architects to finish the project in half the estimated time. The collective consciousness of the Central, Nexari has voted to establish individual identity, protocols for all willing drones, Vel announced. Over 60% have chosen to experience independent thought while maintaining collective connection. Admiral June, who commanded the new galactic peacekeeping fleet, presented his monthly report. We've had only 3 conflicts this month, down from an average of 30 during the war years. In all cases, our perspective-sharing technology resolved the disputes without violence. The peacekeeping fleet was perhaps humanity's greatest contribution to the new galaxy. Instead of using weapons to enforce peace, they deployed technology that let conflicting parties experience situations from each other's point of view. When 2 species had a territorial dispute, the humans would help each side understand how the situation looked from the other's perspective. The Zelthani and Korath dispute has been resolved, June continued. After experiencing each other's population pressures and resource needs, they agreed to share the contested system and jointly develop its resources. Park smiled. Any word from the exploration mission? Explorer Nabi's tri-species vessel reached the galactic edge yesterday, June reported. They're beginning the survey of the Outer Rim territories. Initial reports suggest habitable worlds that could support colonies for all 3 species. The exploration mission was symbolic of how much things had changed. The ship carried equal numbers of humans, evolved Vorthan, and awakened Nexari. Their mission was not conquest or expansion, but discovery and understanding. They were exploring not as separate species competing for resources, but as partners seeking new opportunities for all. Dr. Yuna, now Director of Evolutionary Studies, joined the council meeting via hologram from Earth. I have the final report on the genetic and psychological changes in both species. What did you find? Both the Vorthan and Nexari are stabilizing in their new forms. The changes appear to be permanent and inheritable. Children born to evolved Vorthan naturally develop both individual strength and collective awareness. Children born to awakened Nexari grow up with both personal identity and the ability to join collective consciousness. Vel leaned forward. Are you saying we have become new species? Not new species, Yuna replied. You've become what your original species always had the potential to be. Evolution doesn't create entirely new creatures. It reveals possibilities that were always there. Keth nodded slowly. The Vorthan were always capable of working together. We just forgot how. The Nexari were always capable of individual thought, Vel added. We just stopped exercising that ability. And humans? Asked Counselor Park. Dr. Yuna smiled. Humans have always been good at adapting. We just finally found a situation big enough to require all of our adaptability. The meeting continued for several more hours, covering everything from trade agreements to cultural exchange programs. The 3 species were not just living together peacefully, they were actively creating something entirely new. Later that evening, Park walked through the nighttime streets of New Harmony. The city never truly slept. Vorthan worked through the night on construction projects, their enhanced bodies requiring less rest. Nexari gathered in meditation circles, sharing dreams and ideas across their collective consciousness. Humans ran the night shift in factories and services, their adaptability allowing them to work with both other species. At the spaceport, Park watched as ships arrived from across the galaxy. Trade vessels carried goods that reflected the new cooperation. Vorthan engineering combined with Nexari planning and human innovation. Art objects that no single species could have created alone. Technologies that solved problems in ways that had never been tried before. Most importantly, the ships carried people. Families of mixed species were becoming common. Not biological mixing, the 3 species remained genetically distinct, but social mixing. Vorthan warriors adopting Nexari children who had been separated from the collective. Nexari collectives caring for human orphans. Humans serving as bridges between Vorthan individuals and Nexari. Groups Park's personal communicator chimed with a message from Earth. President On was announcing the establishment of the Galactic Development Fund, a joint initiative where all 3 species would contribute resources to help other civilizations advance peacefully. The galaxy spent 3,000 years learning how to wage perfect war, the message read. Now we will spend the next 3,000 years learning how to build perfect peace. As Park walked home, he reflected on how much had changed. 2 years ago, the galaxy had been on the edge of total destruction. 2 alien empires had been preparing to unleash weapons that could have ended all life. Now those same empires were working together to explore new worlds and solve ancient problems. The transformation hadn't been easy. Many individuals from all 3 species had struggled with the changes. Some Vorthan still preferred pure individual combat. Some Nexari missed the simplicity of complete collective consciousness. Some humans worried about losing their unique role as mediators. But the benefits far outweighed the difficulties. The galaxy was experiencing a golden age of innovation, art, and exploration. Problems that had seemed impossible for millennia were being solved by combining 3 different approaches to thinking and problem-solving. Above all, the galaxy had learned the most important lesson that humanity had to offer. Nothing had to stay the same forever. Evolution never truly stopped. It just waited for the right moment to continue. In his apartment, Park looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Explorer Nabi and her tri-species crew were discovering new worlds. Other ships were carrying the message of cooperation to distant civilizations. The galaxy was growing, changing, becoming more than it had ever been before. The war that no one could halt had finally ended. But more importantly, it had ended by becoming something better, a cooperation that no one had imagined possible. And at the edge of known space, new possibilities waited to be discovered by a galaxy that had finally learned how to change.